Oh, there we go. There I am. Right. Good morning. Welcome to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. This is my twice weekly live webcast. Normally live, very occasionally not live. The weather outside today on Wednesday, the 27th of July, is a bit cloudy at the moment. It's still mild for, well, warm for the time of year, really. Not nearly as hot as last Monday and Tuesday, which is thankful. I was out on the bike last night for a very pleasant bimble around the countryside. But it looks like it's warming up towards the end of the week. So what have we got for you in today's packed show? Clive says good morning. Hello there, Clive. Nice to see you. Right. Well, actually, for some reason, again, I've got the wrong list of events up on the screen. So I will try to get them up on the correct screen. We do have stories. We have a man accused of the death of 7 motorcyclists after a collision in New Hampshire is going on trial. BMW is recalling almost 500,000 of its GS ranges of motorcycles. More details on that for you. DVSA now require COVID sick notes to refund cancelled tests, and I'll tell you why I think that is utterly outrageous. Congestion around a low traffic neighbourhood in London has been proven to cause bus delays by a Transport for London survey. We'll have a quick look at the new CFMoto 700 CLX adventure bike, ADV. One of the most ghastly names they can come up with. I don't know why they just don't give them a proper name, or at least limit the number of X's and ADVs and things. Anyway, BSB will get the BMW F900R as a single make race series from next season. And today's discussion point, which I appear to have forgotten to put up, is all about posture and how that affects how you ride the motorcycle. So grab yourselves a brew, settle down for the next 30 odd minutes. Don't forget, you can join me on these shows every Wednesdays and Sundays at 11 here on Facebook, or you can go over to my YouTube channel if you miss it, and you can catch up over there. Survival Skills UK. Don't forget the all-important UK on the end of that, or you will find somebody sharpening horses' hooves or something similar. So, right, that is what we're about today. Before we go anywhere else, though, just a couple of reminders of events that are coming out. First of all, the first live event of the next month will be the now regular live online talk series presentation, and there is the picture that I wanted to show you. Sights are being seen. It's the full presentation. The talk explains how visual perception works, why sometimes it fails us when we look and don't see objects that are actually visible, and why motorcyclists need to be aware of the issues that drivers face in spotting bikes, and what it is that we can do personally to try to stay out of trouble, rather than simply rely on car drivers to see us and then blame them when they don't spot us. That goes out on Wednesday, 3rd of August 2022, obviously, and that goes out at 8 p.m. Tickets are £5. You can organise yourself with a ticket here in the link. I'll just pop that up for you. It is in the preamble to the show, but just to remind you, here it is. And if you want to, you can also sign up for September's live event too, which is all about riding systems and why we need to apply them systematically, and why simply understanding or a system isn't actually necessarily using it systematically. I'll explain the difference between the two terms. So that's the first Wednesday in September. That's the 7th, and that is also at 8 p.m. in the evening, and tickets for that are also £5. So don't forget, if you do support me over there, all the cash does go into supporting my further work, my further research, and basically comes back to you full circle via all the articles and things that I write for you. Right, okay, so Kevin has also looked in and said good morning. Hello there, Kevin. Right, so first story of the day then is a rather alarming one. A man accused of causing a crash that killed 7 motorcyclists in 2019 in New Hampshire is due to stand trial on Monday. Vladimir Zhukovsky was apparently speeding when he crossed the centre line on a rural 2-lane highway. He was driving a transport truck in Randolph in the state, and he crashed head-on, sadly, into a group of bikers. Now, these riders were actually members of the Jarheads Motorcycle Club, which is a New England group which includes Marines and their spouses. The victims were from New Hampshire, from Massachusetts, and from Rhode Island. And police say Zhukovsky had fentanyl, morphine, and a chemical found in cocaine in his system at the time of the crash. He faces charges for negligent homicide, manslaughter, and driving under the influence. Zhukovsky's pleaded not guilty to the charges, and so he's been held in jail since the crash, awaiting his trial. It seems his driving license had already been suspended in the state of Connecticut following a prior drunken driving arrest, but that suspension didn't apply outside of that state, and so that allowed him to carry on driving. A memorial to the 7 riders was actually recently unveiled. Right, okay. First story from the UK, though, is sort of one of these irritating ones. It's the DVSA are sort of commonly known, sort of only semi-comically, amongst motorcycle trainers as the Double and Variable Standards Agency, and sometimes I really think it's not for nothing either. So here's a tweet I picked up on Monday morning. So this is from a user, basically, of the DVSA system. Hi. Seems very unfair that my son got COVID and so cancelled his driving test to protect his teacher and your examiner, and now you won't rebook or refund without a doctor's note. You're not meant to go to the GP when you have COVID or ask for a sick note according to NHS guidance. The DVSA's response was this. If a candidate is unable to take their practical driving test due to COVID, we do now require a letter from their doctor or a fit note, not self-certificating, confirming the illness in order for us to rebook a free test or refund the test free. They followed that up with a second tweet saying this applies to all practical tests from 22nd of June. Now, that's news to me. I hadn't heard anything about that. There were no obvious announcements that dropped through my virtual letterbox, where announcements like this from the DFT and the DVSA normally appear. So you may be wondering what a fit note is if you've never applied for one. It's what we basically use called sick note, of course. So if you're off work for 7 days or more, then your employer is normally going to ask you for one of these fit notes. It's basically an abbreviation of Statement of Fitness for Work. And you get that from a GP or a hospital doctor if you happen to be in hospital at the time you need it. Now, fit notes are sometimes referred to as medical statements or a doctor's note. So how do you get one? Well, basically, you have to contact your GP surgery or your hospital doctor if you are getting hospital treatment. They then have to assess you. And if they decide that your health affects your fitness for work, they can then issue your fit note. But the NHS guidance also says that if you're off work for 7 days or less, your employer should not ask for medical evidence you've been ill. They can ask you to confirm you have been sick, and you can do this by filling in the form yourself when you return to work, and this is called self-certification. And guess what? The NHS COVID-19 advice says do not ask your GP for a fit note if you are off work because of COVID-19. Instead, you can get an isolation note to send to your employer as proof you need to stay at home. Now, that doesn't seem to be what the DVSA want or will accept. Now, personally, this change, which has obviously been introduced just on a month ago, I think it's awful, frankly. Now, as far as I can tell from a quick Google, the change in the rules doesn't appear to be known. I can't find a policy statement from the DVSA announcing this change of policy. So presumably it's hit a whole bunch of people over the last month. And as we probably know, there was a big surge in COVID cases over the June into the early part of July. So presumably they were getting tests cancelled due to COVID. Now, I accept that a self-certificated note may be used as an excuse to claim a refund on a test that somebody cancelled for some other reason. Maybe they didn't want to take it that particular day, or they wanted to go into work, or maybe they were just on holiday or something. I don't know. But the question that you have to ask yourself is, are the DSA or DVSA, I should say, right to ask candidates to further tax what is an already struggling NHS by sending them out to see a doctor to prove they have COVID to get their cash back? Will the doctor even see them? I simply don't know the answer to that. I think somebody needs to look into this fairly quickly. The obvious people would be the MCIA, who oversee the ATBs welfare. They are the people to talk to, I would say. RAC, ACU, the AA driving school, anybody who is a national organisation should be tackling the DVSA on this and rolling back this decision, frankly, and making sure anybody who cancels due to COVID gets their money back. That is my opinion on that one. I'd be welcome to hear what you have to say about that. Right, now don't forget, if you do enjoy this show, you can support me over on my Coffee page, and all funding does help me keep on producing these shows and generally writing for you. Now, here's something you ought to know about if you have a BMW R1200 or 1250 GS. There's a fair chance you bought it, partly at least, on BMW's reputation for reliability and quality. That seems to be what drove my brother to buy one. So it's slightly alarming to hear that BMW Motorrad has issued a global recall for their best-selling motorcycle that pulls back every GS manufactured between 2013 and 2021. What's not clear at the moment, and I'll just say this right now, is whether this recall affects other models with the same shaft drive. At the moment, it only seems to be the GS. But anyway, it still accounts for a total of a fairly whopping 440,000 units. In Germany alone, the manufacturer has recalled 70,000 motorcycles. Now, why are they doing this? Well, the answer is that they need to add a small hole with a valve to the shaft drive. Now, let me try and get a picture up for you. Why does that one come up? That's not one I wanted. Oh, God. I've lost the picture. I don't know why that's not come up. I'm trying to scroll through to find it. I'll hopefully get there in a moment. No, I can't find it at the moment. I shall have to come back to that. But effectively, what's happened is that the machine has a problem with air and moisture being carried into the shaft drive itself. Now, the reason for this appears to be that when the shaft heats up, the expansion of the air pushes air out of the shaft in the first place, but then when it cools again, it draws air and the moisture, obviously, which is associated with that air, back into the shaft. And the problem then seems to be that the moisture, as you would expect, frankly, causes problems with the metal, and it causes it to rust. Now, I'm still trying to find this picture. I know I've got it somewhere on here. No, it's completely gone missing. I had this all carefully organized and everything seems to have vanished, which is very frustrating. Yeah. No, I can't see it. I don't know where it's gone. Oh, there it is. Right, now let's see if I can get this up now this time. All right, okay, so just a moment. I'll be with you right in a second. So there we are. There's the picture at last. I knew I had that somewhere. So basically what happens is once the air gets in to the past the rubber boot. There's normally a rubber boot over that joint, which is supposedly a good seal. But however, the air gets in and the shaft begins to rust. Now, it's not the rust to the shaft that's the problem. It's the rust that comes off the shaft into the oil, which surrounds everything within the shaft drive itself, and that damages seals and needle bearings that are actually supporting everything. So it seems to be fairly well documented that besides changing the oil, the later shaft-driven BMW models do need checkups from time to time to look at the state of the shaft. The newer models like the R1200 series apparently feature a single unit shaft. The older 1150 series had a detachable shaft joint. So if the shaft is damaged, the entire shaft itself has to be replaced. Now, the problem, as I say, appears to be associated with the regular cooling and warming and cooling cycle. One US owner wrote earlier this year, at the 24K service today, BMW mechanic found pooling water in the swing arm. They took pictures and sent to BMW. Almost immediately, BMW replied telling my dealer to replace the entire shaft under warranty. They had no clue how water was getting in. The boot was in perfect shape. I've never used a pressure washer, only a garden hose. I live in Denver, a very dry climate. So yeah, okay. As I read it, the recall will not tear down and inspect the shaft, but involves drilling a hole near the rear cross joint, which allows the insertion of a one-way valve. And the idea is that this lets the air and moisture out again, presumably to try to keep the air flowing through the system and prevent it from pooling. Condensing pooling. So BMW are emphasizing that the recall is not urgent and can wait for the next service appointment, but it does seem that total shaft failures aren't unknown. And the recall notice says BMW will bear the cost of drilling the hole and installing the valve, but what isn't clear, of course, is when they will replace a shaft drive that's damaged. Obviously, that US rider did have a positive experience. Right, okay, so on to low traffic neighbourhoods. Now, some of these may well have appeared if you live anywhere in a town around your way. Certainly, there was one up the road from here which caused some considerable inconvenience. It's now partially been opened up. It's now just a closed while the school's actually kicking out. But anyway, a couple of days ago, a social media video was doing the rounds, and it was fascinating. It made me laugh because basically it was two drivers having a standoff after they come head to head on a residential street narrowed to a single lane by parked cars. And the woman who filmed the honking and shouting match from her upstairs window promptly argued it proves that we need a low traffic neighbourhood. But she obviously missed the irony of the situation. The road wouldn't have been blocked for that traffic if it hadn't been clogged solid with parked vehicles from people who clearly live in that road on either side of the street. If there hadn't been there, they would have room to pass each other. So it very much strikes me that people who support low traffic neighbourhoods, they want them in their own area, but they probably don't want them anywhere else where they drive, and it possibly inconveniences them from getting from A to B. Anyway, that incident came to mind after I spotted a TfL report which has found that the root cause, that's their words, of congestion in Dulwich Village in South London is due to a low traffic neighbourhood that was introduced in 2020 during the pandemic. Now, local campaign groups have insisted that the LTN has increased traffic on the boundary roads. Those are obviously the roads that flow around the closed area. And what they have said is that Dulwich Village's councillors have either denied that there was increased congestion or suggested it was down to other causes and that their low traffic neighbourhood scheme wasn't to blame. A local resident said that the TFT report is, quote, a relief because it feels like we've had 2 years trying to prove what was clear as day, and it felt really frustrating and upsetting to be told it wasn't the cause of the problem. Now, phase 1 of the LTN shut one particular street to all vehicles except cyclists. Phase 2, which came in November 2020, closed Dulwich Village itself from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. To 10 a.m. and then again from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. So basically during the peak hours, and it shut it to all general traffic vehicles. Now, the TfL report looked at bus journey times, as they are fairly easy to measure. And what they found was that they showed sharp increases in how long it took the buses to get around the area. Soon after the introduction of that phase two. And their report says Herne Hill is the best logical alternate route for northbound drivers who are otherwise unable to travel through Dulwich Village. This has caused increased flow through this section of the network, resulting in increased congestion. And this is one of the problems with low traffic networks. They may reduce traffic flow in one area, but people still have to get from A to B. And the result is you simply dump that traffic onto somebody else's streets. Now, part of the problem is apparently a particular junction which requires drivers avoiding the low traffic network to make a right turn. Now, the Southwark Council, so they've changed the light phasing to help reduce that congestion, but clearly the TfL report directly contradicts the report commissioned by Southwark Council, which said perceived impacts reported in the consultation, such as increased traffic on boundary roads and longer journeys, bus journeys, were not evidenced in the monitoring reports. So clearly, somebody isn't getting the right answer there. Now, sadly, of course, rather than try to find a fix that suits local residents as well as people who have to get from A to B via that region, the debate has turned immediately, of course, into a political football. The Tory councillors are blaming the Labour-controlled Southwark Council, claiming it's a failed scheme. Now, congestion is not the only problem this new low traffic network has caused. In March, an ambulance was delayed when it was trying to attend an emergency after the crew spotted the signs and then decided not to drive through the junction but to take a different route because they didn't know that there was a lack of signs basically saying that they were able to drive through that. That's not the case. I've certainly heard of ambulances and police vehicles and fire engines too, all getting tickets from systems like this and then having to go and waste time fighting them. It seems that the London Ambulance Service had actually written to Southwark Council previously asking them to ensure that the route was clearly marked by road signs or road markings to say that it was accessible for emergency vehicles. But a Southwark spokesman said it's not common practice to sign access for emergency vehicles in such circumstances. There's no provision for this type of sign in the national regulations on highway signage. There may not be, but I'm sure there's nothing to stop Southwark putting their own sign up. Anyway, they're now carrying out an audit where they say to decide whether or not they need to amend those signs. Right, so low traffic networks. I'm sure most of us probably have come across them, and most of us have probably found them extremely irritating when you do come across them. Right, I'm trying to get the next photo up for you, and again, for some reason, the photo display thing is out of sync with what I want to show you, but I have got there in the end. So this is what we want to have a look at. There it is. Now, a few days ago, I was talking about the end of the road of the ICE engine and suggesting that the vast majority of new petrol engine motorcycles will either come from China or will be variations on an existing platform. So here is a bike that ticks both of those boxes simultaneously. It's the CFMoto, and take a deep breath, 700CL-X space ADV. So that's the 700CL X ADV. It's the third bike basically to be based on CFMoto's middleweight platform with the 700cc motor, and it's making its way to production. It's 3 years since it was actually presented as a prototype at the 2019 Milan show, but its final appearance as a production model has been delayed due to COVID. The long-windedly named bike, which I will just call the 700, joins the existing sport and heritage variants in the range. So what distinguishes this bike from the others? Well, basically, CFMoto have been supplying major manufacturers with components since the early 1980s, and the machine is actually built around a 693cc engine, which is said to be derived from the Kawasaki's own 650 twin. It's a twin cylinder, 4 valve, it's Bosch fuel injected, it produces 74 horsepower, 68 newton meters of torque at 6,500, and it's linked through a 6-speed gearbox. Now, assuming it follows the style of the other models, it should get a slipper clutch. At the rear end, you get a rising rate rebound adjustable KYB shock. Okay, it's not top spec shock, but the fact it is rising rate is quite impressive because most of these bikes have straight push shocks. The Kawasaki does, for example. KYB also supply the forks up front. The frame is steel, which means it should be fairly robust, if a little bit on the heavy side. Now, the bike shares many of the features of the previously released Heritage model, including a very distinctive X style front headlight, which is of course LEDs. It gets some of its own distinctive features. The sort of high-rise beaky front mudguard there is one. They get wider, higher bars than standard. The tank, I think, is the same 13-litre one that you'll see on the other bike, but the seat is a single piece. It's a ribbed. It looks like an unpleasant brown color as well. You also get a slightly upswept exhaust, nothing spectacular there, and a slim tail section with an LED tail lamp. You also get a couple of pannier mounts. I'll just zoom in on that bike again a little bit more for you, and you can see them there at the back of the machine. So they're built in to the bike. Not particularly attractive, but hey ho, it doesn't cost you anything, so I can't complain. You get the usual TFT instrument cluster, and all up weight is likely to be around about 195 kilos, 430 pounds. So not a featherweight, but not unduly heavy either by modern bike standards. It also gets a new off-road riding mode, although frankly I would say that looking at that bike, it's more kind of hipster street scrambler than desert racer, and I would say that it takes its styling cues from the recent wave of rather unpleasant designed urban customs. The machine's been described as rugged. Personally, I think that's a pseudonym for ugly, but your view may differ. Do let me know what you think. The bike is going out on the global market, and the euro price is 7,199. So not too pricey, but not exactly bargainously cheap as you might expect from a Chinese machine. As they move upwards in terms of reliability, design, and general construction, the price is rapidly rising to meet Japanese standards. Right. On to the final bit of the show. It's the better biking tip for today. And I had another picture which I meant to get up. I'll put it up in a minute rather than mess around trying to find it. But basically, the photo, when you get to see it in a few minutes, it will show you how not to ride a motorcycle. The rider is sitting almost on the back seat. He's so far from the seat that he's having to reach out with straight arms to the bars. And one of the things that I do try to get over to people on my training courses really early on is that how we sit on the bike is actually crucial to our control. If we do not sit on the motorcycle in the right manner, then it is going to impact the way the bike handles beneath us. Now, any idiot can ride in a straight line. I say that because basically the bike does that job itself. But as soon as we hit bumps or we catch gusts of wind, then what we're doing on top of the bike suddenly becomes rather important. And of course, the straight bits of road lead us to the problem areas like turning corners, roundabouts, bends, junctions, etc. So how we sit on the bike on the straight will have a big effect on how we get around whatever's at the end of it. So let's think about what we're going to be doing when we're sitting on the bike. When we're actually upright in a straight line on a boring bit of road, now is the time to start thinking about our posture, ready to be able to deal with the next riding problem, rather than simply mentally switching off until we arrive and find we're not in a great position. So first thing to look at is how we're actually holding the handlebars. Now, our grip should be firm but light at the same time. What I mean by that is if we have a death grip on the rubbers, then we are never ever going to be able to use the front brake, the clutch, or the throttle smoothly. And you actually find that if you're gripping very hard with your fingers, then wrists are also going to be stiff. And if our wrists are stiff, it's almost impossible to get the handlebars to move, because if you think about it, every time the bars move, our wrists have to bend to match what the bars are doing. And if our wrists don't flex, then it's difficult to steer. And we need to think next about where our elbows are. One of the problems with a lot of riders is you'll see them with their elbows actually stuck out either side as they ride. If you're doing that, try to relax, try to get them dropped down so that your elbows come down from up here and actually drop down by your side. You'll find it a lot more comfortable, a lot more relaxed. But of course, as the elbow's stiff, then the shoulder is also stiff. So all the joints in the from the fingers all the way back up to the shoulders, they're all working together. If our elbows aren't relaxed, then our shoulders won't be relaxed. Now, if our shoulders aren't relaxed, that makes it difficult to make the necessary movements to steer the bike. And it makes it difficult to do things like look over our shoulders. Okay, most of that is neck movement, but there will be some shoulder movement too. And if we look over our shoulder and everything from here down to the wrist is stiff, as soon as we look over our shoulder, what happens? Our arms move and we steer the bike off course. Now, used to find that all the time with new riders on CBT and doing direct access. That they would glance over their shoulder and they would suddenly veer off course. So, of course, a lot of riders actually get very reluctant to look over their shoulders because the bike won't go in a straight line whilst they do it. But the problem is not the bike veering off course, it's the rider inadvertently feeding that steering input all the way down from the shoulder through the elbow and the wrists into the bars. So the answer is relax. Try to work on loosening up everything in order. So feel what you're doing with your hand. If your fingers are clenched very tight, then try and loosen them. There should be a nice light grip on the bars. It doesn't need to be a death grip. Make sure your your wrist rather, will rotate. Make sure your elbow will move. If your elbow won't move, your shoulder, as I said, will force feed any sort of bumps or gusts of wind straight into the bars. So get everything loose. What else can you do? The neck. Now, one of the things that I hear people say very often is that they look by moving their eyes. They don't need to move their head. Well, again, I hear this from learner riders. I also hear it from more experienced riders. In fact, it's really hard work, physically hard work, to keep turning your eyes to the side. And so we don't do that. What we do is we actually turn our head and we keep our eyes pretty focused, pretty stable in the middle of their orbit, and we make a head turn to refocus. What we don't do is kind of flick our eyes from side to side. And anyway, there's a limit to how much they'll move. They'll only move a few degrees within the orbit of the eye socket. So it's much easier to turn our head. So if we're not being able to turn our head, then it's probably a stiff neck. So again, there's another thing to think about relaxing. The legs and back. Now, how we grip the tank with our knees is important. As I said, we don't want to be holding rigidly onto the handlebars. They're not a grab rail. So how do we secure ourselves to the motorcycle? Well, the answer is to grip the tank with our knees. Now, even if you look at some scooters, you'll find what they have is a little hump at the front of the seat, which actually gives your legs something to press against as you're riding it. So even a scooter, you can use your feet to brace against the footboards, and you can lock your knees either side of the little hump at the front of the seat there. So as I say, in our straight line, it doesn't matter particularly if we're sitting like a sack of spuds on the saddle, because the bike itself is doing all the hard work of staying upright. But the moment we try to change speed or direction, then we need that firm base on the bike, because that is what allows us to move the upper half of our body, everything from the spine through the shoulders and down the arms, without moving our body on the bike in the opposite direction. Remember, action and reaction. So if we want to use nice firm inputs on the bike to change direction, we need to lock our knees into the tank, get that firm base on the bike, and then the top half of the body is free to do what it wants. But the same applies when we're hitting the brakes. We don't want to be thrown forward. We certainly don't want to be resting on the bars, because again, we're taking away the feel that we get from what the front tire is doing if we're leaning hard on the handlebars. If we're accelerating, we don't want again to be hanging on to the bars for dear life as we get thrown backwards by the acceleration of the bike underneath us. That's where the knees come into effect again, gripping the petrol tank. So any time that the bike is changing speed, changing direction, or dealing with bumps and gusts of winds, it's the legs which do the hard work. They grip the petrol tank. On a bit of motorway, traveling at constant speed with nothing much happening, you can get into a comfortable slouch. It really doesn't matter. But on a twisty road or in town, if you're braking for a set of lights, it's the knees that should be taking your weight against the braking force, not your arms against the bars. Okay, how do you know if you're tense and nervous? Well, a good clue is to monitor what you're doing, believe it or not, with your teeth. If your teeth are clenched, it implies that you are tense. And then check everything else. Check the hands, check the wrists, check the elbows, rotate the neck and shoulders. They'll all stiffen up if you're tense. A regular routine of untensing everything, a double check, as I say, in moments when nothing much is happening, will go a long way to relaxing you for the moments when you do need a bit more relaxation on the bike. Ask yourself too, what makes us tense? Well, generally speaking, it's arriving at a hazard, worrying that we're actually over our heads. So riding a bit quick, riding too close to other vehicles, they all push our tolerance for what we're doing to the limit. So the simple answer is, if you find yourself stiffening up, tensing up on a motorcycle, just slow down, back off whatever it is you're doing a little bit. If it's following your mate, back off, let them go. If it's a rider pushing you too fast from behind, again, just pull over, let them go past you. Same with a car that's being a bit aggressive. If you find simply riding alone that you are pushing yourself too hard, just back off a little bit. Constantly monitor the pressures on you and monitor your posture, and anything on that checklist I've just given you that triggers a warning, just ease off a little bit on what you're doing. Run through those relaxation exercises, and here's the nice bit. What you'll often find is, as soon as you relax, you'll automatically start looking further ahead. You'll start steering more positively, you'll start braking more positively, you'll start accelerating more positively, and very quickly the speed that you just shed to get rid of the tenseness will come back, but this time you won't be so stressed by it. So there we are. That's today's better biking tip, all about posture. Again, don't forget, if you want to some more understanding of this, I'm available for 1 hour online consultations, and I'll quite happily look at a video of you riding or anything like that, where I can see you or just talk about the general issues, and I'll explain in a little bit more detail why they matter. Or you can take one of my confidence builder courses, which will look specifically at any riding issues you have. If you think you've got problems with posture, I'll just take you out for a quick spin, have a look at your riding, and then work through some practical exercises on the road and give you a chance to apply those exercises in a riding environment where you'll find that they become very useful. So don't forget, those courses are available online or on road, and I have plenty of availability through next month and into September as we speak. 1 more month of summer before we get to the autumn, so hopefully still 2 months of lovely riding weather. Let's just hope it's not too hot. So if you are out on the bike today, do stay shiny side up. That's pretty much it for today's show. Be back on Sunday with another round of 11ses. And once again, I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. Thank you very much for tuning in to my show today, and hopefully see you in a few days' time.